Welcome to all rhyming ragamuffins. This is medium rare poetry, and I am your host and poet, Filet Mignon. Today's poem is a tribute to Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States of America, who has spent his entire life in public service. This is a man who's been through tragedy and hard times and all the blows that come with being a politician, and he has demonstrated courage all the way through his life. And the greatest act of courage was to actually give up power, which is not easy for a politician. So today's poem, which is entitled No Ugly Duckling, is for our Joe Biden.
No Ugly Duckling by Filet Mignon. When the US President perceives the final end of his long road, the only thing he can ensure is the White House lawn is mowed. This time of non-achievement sees him term the old lame duck, executive decisions focused on the mover's truck. But not this time. Joe Biden had relinquished his domain to Kamala and Tim, who could extend the current chain. The justices of righteousness had shocked the wide community by granting carte blanche power in their president's immunity. So Joe, without his hands constrained, began the nation's purge to rid the public service of the senseless MAGA scourge. He pensioned off the goodness gracious A.G. Merrick Garland, replaced him with the great-grandson of Mad Dog Joseph Stalin. He swept the DOJ clean with an anti-static broom. The MAGA strangled justice, waiting for their dawn to bloom. Without restraint, the lawyers rounded up these Trump-led foes and charged them all with treason, showing Joe was on his toes. The 7 million whiners who kowtowed to Donald's orders were ferried to the Badlands to patrol the southern borders. This tactic worked a treat, as now these lazy sods were working. Unemployment plummeted, now that they were not shirking. The taxes that they paid was channeled to the greater good, to help along the helpless, just as fair taxation should. The flow of immigration was reduced to one small lump. Commander-in-Chief, reluctantly, was B.S. Bonespurs Trump. With things at home all settled, Joe then boarded Air Force One. Some messy quarrels overseas had yet remained undone. With nimble hands he pinched the ears of Hamas like a corkscrew and dragged them screaming to the face of nasty Netanyahu. He armed them both with pistols, locked the door and stole away. The cooler heads outside forged peace, and that's how it would stay. He then took off to Moscow for a word in Putin's ear. Ukraine was uninvaded thus, an end to pain and fear. Joe donned his Chinese overcoat and sat with Xi Jinping. Xi's Taiwan claim was mollified, no more a Xi Jing fling. In cold Tehran, Joe ushered warmth to calm their hostile hearts. A cup of tea, a gentle word, made for a brand new start. Where'er he went around the globe, Joe brought his brand of peace, a wise and calm example whereby conflagrations ceased. The diplomat's incentive was the US brand of sway. He'd extradite the Donald, and his keep they'd have to pay. Back home the folks were settled, the election had grown near. The feats of Joe had shown that they had nothing more to fear. The MAGA had been cancelled, Congress crawlers had resigned. They knew the DOJ was sniffing round their foul behinds. The final job for Joe was now to tidy up the courts. He sacked the MAGA justices. Immunity was sport. The bench increased to 13 as the districts now dictated. Incumbents democratic, so that justice would be sated. A code of conduct was enforced to rule this institution. Their focus was to follow true the nation's constitution. And then the constitution was rewritten by the best to simplify the language and withstand all legal tests. A modern piece of paper framing up a modern nation without the endless lawsuits causing Commonwealth castration. The final act of this fine man, surrendering immunity. No president should have the right to unabashed impunity. History shows this humble man who put the people first, repaired the heart of nationhood, which long had been their thirst. With gentle hands he brought all warring factions close together. This land of many backgrounds flocked as birds of one great feather. The home of possibility, where nothing's out of reach, rose from then on to greatness due to one man's honest speech. The lame duck Joe became a swan with love and grace so regal, the elder who restored the soul, the nation's famed bald eagle.
What a selfless act for Joe Biden to hand over power when he realised he had reached the end of his road in politics, to hand the baton on to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And it's just a measure of the man to show he always put the United States and its people first, above all other things, and it's something that every politician and every community leader should bear in mind and use Joe as their flagship, someone to look up to, someone to emulate. And he's just a lovely man, and I get all a bit teary. Anyway, I hope you like the poem, and good on you, Joe. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye for now.